Part 2. Jerkneev's carriage slowly reduced its speed until it finally came to a halt. However, he still could not disembark immediately. It was troublesome, but Jerkneev had to attend to his own preparations for the sake of style and security. Normally, preparing the Emperor would have been performed by underlings, such as the maids in the other carriages. However, they did not have the luxury of waiting for those carriages to arrive. After all, they had come to apologize, and keeping the wrong party waiting too long was a foolish move. After Jerkneev adjusted his clothes, he fastened his cape over them. This was an extremely valuable item made from a magical beast's skin and further treated with magic. With it on, not even the coldest temperatures outside would inconvenience him. Then, he slid his scepter into his belt, which completed his minimum basic preparations. Jerkneev looked himself over one more time, to make sure that his appearance would not shame himself or the Empire. After this, he would be fighting a war of words with Ainzu Gaon. In other words, his clothing was like a warrior's battle dress. The consequences of even the slightest crease would not be limited to simple embarrassment. Although it would be good if his opponent was not observant enough to pick those flaws out, he did not want to be underestimated because he looked shabby. Jerkneev nodded in satisfaction, and just at that moment, a knock rang out from the door. Then, "I shall disembark first, Your Majesty." "Please do." After that short answer, Bazawood opened the carriage's door. It was a stately, proper exit that befitted the carriage which bore the highest authority in the Baharuth Empire. Just in case, Rune interposed himself between the Emperor and the outside as the door opened, serving as a shield for Jerkneev. They could see what lay outside, beyond Bazawood. The first thing that came into view was the grass of the plains. After that were the royal guards, lined up to face each other. Beyond them lay a hill that swelled up from the plains, and what looked like a huge lattice door that seemed to have been half buried. Is the great underground tomb of Nezarec behind that door? It seems a little different from what I've been told. Well, errors like this are within acceptable ranges. After disembarking from the carriage, Jerkneev fell in step with Bazawood, who was already in formation with the royal guards, and set forth. Jerkneev took a deep breath. The enchantment on his clothing ensured that the air which entered his lungs would be fresh and clear. Granted, it was still cold, but not uncomfortably so. As he exhaled, he worked his jaw and quickly glanced at the subordinates around him. Fluter was wearing his long robes and holding his staff, and he was trailed by his adept disciples. There were divine magic casters with holy symbols hanging at their chests. They belonged to the Night Orders. Then there were the motionless royal guards, though he now saw the faces of the outriders from earlier among them. Personally, Jerkneev wanted to ask them what they had seen, but now was not a good time to speak. It seemed the mates, who were in another carriage, had not arrived yet. Well, they were gifts anyway. It's only to be expected. Then, when they said a log house, did they mean that lattice door? Or is that it? When he looked to the left, he saw a single-story wooden cabin. It seemed utterly incongruous with both the plains and the cemetery, and he smiled bitterly. After all, where had all this wood come from? The Azelaresia mountain range loomed in the distance, and he thought of the great forest of Tub. Did they haul it all the way from there? I don't know how many kilometers the wood must have traveled, but they would have needed a lot of labor to bring it all the way here. Although he did not know much about log cabins, Jerkneev did not feel that this structure was particularly eye-catching. Even so, when he took the surroundings into account, he had to admit that the fact that they had managed to build this here was impressive in and of itself. But, that's a big door. A double door, huh? And built so high. It's 3 stories tall by itself. Could this place have been built as some kind of storehouse? Jerkneev looked to the cabin, with Bazawood and Lanas on his right, Fluter on his left, and Rune behind him. Your Majesty, should we order the people in the other carriages to disembark as well? Jerkneev did not turn to Rune, who was whispering in his ear as he answered. No, there's no need for that. Rather, we should. Jerkneev's words were cut off mid-sentence. It was not just because the cabin door opened, but because their eyes had been drawn to the two beauties who were now slowly walking out of it. They were dressed in orthodox maids' wear, well-tailored, but otherwise unremarkable. However, the maids themselves carried themselves in an abnormally prim and proper way. Even Jerkneev, who had seen many fair maidens in his time, was visibly surprised, and he stared like they had grasped his very heart. They are too beautiful. But they were beautiful indeed. If they were noble daughters of the Empire, he would have applauded their looks without reserve. He might even have wanted to add them to his harem. However, this was a tomb in the middle of the grass plain. They were utterly out of place here, and as a result, an ominous feeling came over him. Jerkneev could hear the sound of a tongue clicking softly beside him, but he did not have the energy to waste on such matters. Say, Gramps, could this be an illusion? About that, well, I cannot say for sure, but I don't think so. Are they humans? They don't look like dark elves. And about that, I cannot say for sure either, but I doubt they're humans. Those answers somewhat relieved Jerkneev. Since they were not humans, it would not be strange if they appeared in a place like this. It was an answer that he could understand and which he desperately wanted to believe. Both maids bowed simultaneously, and the one with the bund-up hair spoke. Greetings and welcome, Your Imperial Majesty Emperor Jerkneev Rune Farlord El Nix. My name is Yuri Alpha and I am tasked with welcoming you. Behind me is my assistant, Lupus Regina Beta. Though our time together may be short, I hope we will get along. Although he delayed in responding because he was overcome by the two of them, Jerkneev managed to reply in the end. Then, I thank you for going to all this trouble for us. Indeed, I must thank Ainzuel Dono as well, for receiving us with such lovely ladies like yourself. With that in mind, there is no need to trouble yourself by addressing me as Emperor or using other honorifics. I will be glad if you treat me as an ordinary individual and called me Jur. Nay, indeed, I hope you will do so. Jerkneev smiled brightly to Yuri. However, even after receiving a smile that would have had any woman swooning for him, Yuri's serious expression remained as it was. Jerkneev could also tell from peering at her eyes that her heart was similarly unmoved. Was he not to her taste, or was she the type that did not mix business with pleasure? Or was she filled with loyalty to the person she served? I can't read her. I wanted to leave a good impression, but it seems like that'll be very difficult. And I was pretty confident that I could handle anyone if they were women. If Gramps is right, then it must be because they aren't humans. Well, that's non-human women for you. Still, what species do they belong to? They look like they should be humans, or at least, close to human. He had no clue as to their true identities. Judging by those two dark elves and these two maids, Ainzuel Gaon must be a man who placed great importance on appearances. If that's the case, since their looks don't match up to those two, they're worthless now. Jerkneev considered the ladies in waiting he had brought along in the carriages. He was proud of their looks, and he had brought them along as gifts for Ainzuel Gaon. Depending on the situation, each of them were nobles who had been made fully aware of what would happen to their families if they disobeyed Jerkneev's commands. And they had bid teary-eyed farewells to their kin before they left and come here with determination in their hearts. There's no point. Still, after knowing that the other side already has beauty superior to them, would they rejoice because they were no longer need? Or would they be jealous of them as fellow women? I guess I should have gotten some elves as presents, shouldn't I? Jerkneev had not been able to bring along slave elves from the Empire with him because there had not been enough time to prepare them. And also because he wanted to hold them in reserve as capital for future dealings. Those dealings would not be with Ains but held secretly with Mare. He felt that he could carefully investigate the Mare girl, strip her bare before him, and use her for his purposes. We'll bait her with promises of emancipating her enslaved kin. In exchange, she will do some simple favors for us behind Gaon's back. After that, we can use those incidents as blackmail material to have her do more things for us. At least, that was the plan. Just as Jerknev was mulling over his schemes for Mare, Yuri responded to him. Your Majesty is most kind. However, our master Ainzuel Gaon has explicitly ordered us not to show any rudeness or disrespect to the Emperor, and as such, I regret that we cannot accede to your generous request. Is that so? Well, that's a shame. Jerknev shrugged in an exaggerated manner, like he was putting on a comedic act. Still, please feel free to address me as intimately as you see fit. How about Gaon Dono? Understood. Our master is still making his preparations, and he will need a bit more time. I pray you will be patient and wait for him. I see. Then, where shall we wait? Inside that cabin? No. We hope you will wait here. Jerknev raised his head to the sky. Although it did not look like it would rain soon, it was hard to call the weather good with those dark clouds in the sky. In addition, there must be a chill in the air since it was winter, although Jerknev could not feel it throughout his enchanted clothes. What is he thinking, telling us to wait here? Could it be that he wants us to know our place? Since he had been ordered to come to the offended party's home to apologize, Jerknev was already at a disadvantage. And then, on top of that, Ainzuel Gaon wanted to demean him further with this. Clearly, Gaon had a bad personality. Is that so? Jerknev narrowed his eyes. Then, we shall return to our carriages and await him therein. Jerknev could feel the anger boiling out of his numerous royal guards as he said those words. They might be in a neighboring country and one which might end up being an enemy to them, but even so, letting the emperor of a great nation wait in a place like this was far too rude. However, nobody could vocalize these feelings. Since their liege lord had clearly accepted these terms, there was no room for them as loyal servants to say anything else. Unless, was it because they saw the carnage the dark elf could wreak? If that is so, Gaon, you're a hard man to deal with. With just one move you've struck fear into all our hearts. Even if that ability could only be used once in a lifetime, who would be brave enough to put that to the test? And then there's the fact that it was a child doing it. You're giving us the impression that even a child can be that powerful. I pray you to wait. Yuri's quiet voice cut through the air before Jerknev could take a step. Since the delay originated from our side, we would be poor hosts and in defiance of Ainsama's commands if we did not extend every courtesy to you in compensation. Jerknev was somewhat surprised. Ains. He allows his maids to address him so directly? Maybe they're not maids. No, I see. At the very least, they have a close relationship. Has he claimed their bodies yet? No, any man would understand why. Given their looks, the difficulty would be in keeping one's hands off them. A faint feeling of sympathy grew within Jerknev, and then he replied with exaggerated politeness. Oh, then, we must be grateful to Gaon Dono. Well then, what sort of reception can we look forward to, and where can we expect to find it? We are in the process of preparing it. To begin with, the weather does not look very welcoming. Let us change that. What do you? Jerknev was not the only one gasping in surprise. The magic casters, royal guards, Basilwood, Lena's, even Fluter, all of them could not help but exclaim in wonder. The dark clouds above them began to move slowly. Within moments, they had vanished without a trace, as though some invisible giant had scattered them with his hands. The hippogriff riders in the air were thrown into confusion, which was something those on the ground could empathize with. Why does it feel warmer? You too? You mean I'm not mistaken? As Jerknev heard the quiet exchanges between his guards, he shucked off his cloak, which dispelled the magic which maintained the temperature of his body. Just then, Yo, your Majesty! Rune exclaimed at Jerknev's sudden disrobing, but the Emperor did not answer his subordinate. Fuha! What is this? What on earth is this? Gramps, what's going on? Jerknev abandoned his calm and looked to Fluter with a twisted expression on his face. The refreshing, clear air which surrounded him now should only have been found in spring. The chill grasp of winter was nowhere to be found. Jerknev had never heard of magic like this during Fluter's lessons. In that case, what kind of spell was this, anyway? This should not be the work of arcane magic. I seem to recall a druidic divine spell that could control the weather. Fluter seemed unable to control the broad smile on his face as he spoke. Weather control should be a 6th-tier spell. However, judging by your Majesty's reaction, this may not be a simple manipulation of the weather. It must be a higher-tier spell. How incredible. And this spell is the work of that dark elf, of that emissary, then? That much he could accept, if it was the work of that magic caster who could cause the earth to swallow his men up in its cracks. No, in truth, he hoped that was the case. He did not want to believe that there was another magic caster out there who was stronger than her. That would be a nightmare. Indeed, that might be the case. But I cannot be sure. Fluter seemed to find all this terribly amusing, which made frustration well up in Jerknev's heart. Although his mentor was an excellent teacher who was worthy of respect, he was hopeless once magic was involved. It was extremely irritating when he got like that. I believe that should have refreshed you somewhat. Then, let us begin the next phase. The maid ignored Jerknev's rising irritation and tossed out another bombshell at him. The young emperor desperately fought the urge to tell her to stop. Don't shake my heart anymore, he thought, but in the end, his obligations as the emperor of the Baharuth Empire went out and he managed to control himself. Now then, come here. In response to Yuri's orders, the doors of the log house opened, and something huge stepped out. Gay. A lone cry rang out. It was a strange sound that one might expect of a strangled chicken. When they realized who had cried out, terror filled the hearts of everyone present, not just Jerknev. Indeed, it felt like they were dreaming. The one who had made that uncharacteristic sound was the High Court Wizard of the Empire. Triarchs, Fluter Paradine. He was a man who is said to be able to rival the 13 heroes. A man like that now stood with eyes wide with terror, his gaze fixed on the things emerging from the log house. Shortly after that, several screams filled the air, all of them from Fluter's disciples. Impossible. That's unbelievable. This is impossible. Danger. An attack is coming. Defensive magic. Please allow us to use defensive magic. Fluter glared at his disciples, all of whom were in full battle readiness. Silence. Calm yourselves, all of you. The being emerging from the log house was worthy of their caution and dread. The eyes of everyone from the entire imperial contingent were focused on the single point. There was no doubt at all that it was a monster. It was a monster sheathed in black plate armor. Its body was excessively large, and its silhouette was utterly evil. It was as though a god had drawn forth the essence of violence and brutality from all humanity, concentrated it, and given it physical form. Its rotted face had no expression, yet they could all sense a brilliant, shing hatred burning in its empty eye sockets. And there were 5 of them. The vast body of the one at their head was carrying a large stone table. The 4 behind it held various utensils and many chairs. None of them had any hostile intent. In contrast, the vigilance and panic of Fluter's disciples seemed almost laughable. There was a sound of something falling to the ground. One of Fluter's acolytes had collapsed to his knees upon the ground, his face pale and his body devoid of strength. Or rather, almost all of the 4 acolytes he had brought along had ended up that way. Their pale faces were frozen in shock as they began hyperventilating. Impossible. How could this? No, it can't be. Are those Death Knights? Are they being controlled? And in those numbers? Something flashed through Jerknev's mind. He forgot himself and shouted angrily. He no longer had the luxury of preserving his calm. Death Knights? What do they mean by Death Knights? Gramps, answer me. I've heard that name before. Does it have anything to do with that undead creature that's rumored to be locked up under the Ministry of Magic? Indeed. It was a Death Knight. That was the name of an undead creature that could plunge the Empire into dire straits just by itself. Nobody answered Jerkneev's query. Fflewddur was staring with eyes wide open, gazing with mad delight upon the Death Knight. Jerkneev saw that he would not be getting an answer and realized that talking further to him would be fruitless. Instead, Jerkneev quickly stepped forward and seized one of the disciples by his lapels. What are these Death Knights? Answer me. Your Majesty. As you said, that legendary undead monster sealed within the nether reaches of the Ministry of Magic is, indeed, a Death Knight. They're creatures that even Master cannot control. All Jerkneev could do was laugh. The dignity that he had clung to as the Emperor of the Baharuth Empire was no more. It had crumbled to ash and blown away on the wind. Foo. What do you mean, legendary undead? There's 5 of them right there in front of us. Or are you saying that Death Knights come in groups and 5 of them count as one entity? Huh? Are you kidding me? And no, nothing like that. He sensed someone standing beside him. When he glanced over, he saw that it was one of the Empire's strongest warriors, Bazawood. The man's face was pale, and Jerkneev could see it starting to twitch. Your Majesty. Please listen to this with a calm heart. The situation now is very bad. Even if all of us went at once, we would not be able to stop even one of them. Perhaps it would be a good idea to sound a retreat. This is bad. Really bad. Look at how my hand trembles. As Jerkneev looked over to Bazawood's hand, it began to shake. After looking at his twitching face, it was clear that these were not pre-battle tremors. Is that what they mean by unfathomable? Do you think it could be stronger than Stronov-san? The other member of the 4 knights was further behind than when she had started out, and she was still continuing her slow retreat. The only reason why she had not broken into an all-out sprint was because she did not want to attract the Death Knight's attention and thus, its hostility. This whole thing felt like a nightmare come to life. And then, before them, the way the Death Knights were calmly arranging the furniture and utensils on the grassy plains was the very picture of the loyal manservant. There was nothing in their actions which suggested that they were legendary undead which could destroy a country. However, after looking at the reactions of everyone around him, he knew it was a fact that they were undead which even the most powerful magic caster in Jerkneev's knowledge, Fflewddur Paradine, could not command. This implied that there might be more than 5 of these monsters, whose fighting ability was far in excess of Fflewddur's own. The object of comparison, Fflewddur Paradine, was someone whose fighting power rivaled that of the entire Imperial army. Of course, he did not have infinite mana, and in a straight fight, they might be able to win. However, if Fflewddur used teleportation or flying spells, then it would be the entire Imperial army that would be slaughtered instead. That would mean that the 5 Death Knights here represented 5 times the fighting strength of the entire Imperial army. Impossible. Something like this should not have happened. This was far too much power for an individual to possess. No, even a country would be hard-pressed to wield such might. This was the sort of power which only a few famous nations or republics of legend could command. And to think, the master of a meager little tomb actually possessed such puissance. The reality which he had been trying his best to flee from ever since those 2 dark elves had come before him now stared him straight in the face. Ainzuelgaon. He's a monster we can't stop. No, that we can't even touch. Just like a tiny boat tossed around in a raging storm, so too was Jerkneev's heart tormented by this incredible shock. In the end, however, he wrestled his emotions down and regained his calm with iron will. He had seen his royal guards annihilated in the shadow of the dragon's vast body. Those things allowed Jerkneev to prepare his heart. Without these prior experiences, the impact on him would have been greater. He might have shown a more unsightly side of himself. This tomb is... How powerful is Ainzuelgaon? Those 5 Death Knights and those 2. Even with that dragon included, that can't be all, can it? Why is he hiding in this place? When did he start taking up residence here? Or perhaps his preparations are finally complete. I've heard that when many undead creatures gather in one place, an even more powerful undead being is born. That's why these Death Knights. No, could it be that he's even more powerful than these Death Knights? Not good. There's no time, but I still have to think of a way. As Jerkneev's rapid thoughts drove him ever further into confusion, Yuri cut in. Please be at ease. All these Death Knights were created by Ain Sama himself. They are absolutely obedient to his orders, and in his place, I have gained the right to command them. I will not permit any of you to come to harm. Jerkneev had struggled to piece his thoughts together, but Yuri's words had blown them away. He created them. Ain Zuelgaon could create undead like these through a mere act of will. That was the awful truth. Creating such beings would require expenditures equal to their vast power, and he could either meet that cost or bypass it entirely. No, this must be a bluff. How could anyone make things like that? He must be lying to inflate his own combat power. Because if he's not, a smile appeared on Jerkneev's face. For some reason, everything seemed so bothersome now. I'm done with this. I don't know anything anymore. This time, let's just settle for seeing what the other side can do. Yes. Fuha. Just as Jerkneev decided to abandon all delusions of control, a laugh of sheerest joy rang out from beside him. It came from Fluter. Be they royal guards, acolytes or priests, the faces of everyone except Jerkneev were frozen in shock. Fluter Paradine was a magic caster of the highest order, and a hero possessed of incomparable education and knowledge besides. Countless entries in the history books of the Empire told of how he had single-handedly engaged monsters which threatened the safety of the nation, and emerged triumphant. His saintly demeanor also meant he was honored and respected by many people. In truth, many of the people here felt the same way about him. And now, Fluter was laughing in a way that shattered the mental image that everyone had of him. There was power in that laugh. He had the aura of a hero. There was no doubt that Fluter was radiating a fearsome pressure, and not the warmth that Jerkneev sometimes felt from the man who was as close to him as his father. He possessed immense magical might, enough to take on all the 4 knights at once. And his voice took on a demented tone as he appeared to be going insane. It was only natural that the nearby royal guards would break out in goosebumps. Amidst all this, only the people from Nazarick and Jerkneev kept their cool. He controls Death Knights, and in such numbers. Marvelous. 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 Fuha. A single tear oozed from the corner of his eye, and he smiled like a madman. No, that was not it. This was the true nature of a man who had abandoned his position as a wizard of the imperial court to glimpse the deepest mysteries of the abyss called magic. Until now, it had been hidden under the mask of a hero, but it had surfaced in the presence of a powerful magic caster. Well then, Your Majesty, what shall we do now? Should we flee with teleportation magic? I think if we teleported now, we should be able to make it, no? Assuming the terrain allows for it. Fluter said this to Jerkneev, a mocking smile on his face. I like that face of yours, Gramps. Then, let me ask a question in turn. Do you think I will run? Cracks spread rapidly throughout Fluter's face. That was the smile of a madman, which instilled terror in all who saw it. I expected nothing less of Your Majesty. No, my darling Jur. My pupils, open your eyes and be grateful for the fact that you can lay your eyes upon the highest, the most exalted of all magic casters on the continent. Now that you have seen the end of your journey, you must work towards it. The faces of Fluter's disciples and the royal guards turned paler and paler as they realized the true nature of the being whose yard they now occupied. They knew their comrades had been massacred. However, the legendary magic caster from their history books had called him the most exalted of all magic casters. The immense stress from that felt like a huge stone which had been lodged in their bellies. Your Majesty, this is bad, right? Do you mind if I run first? Basilwood seemed confused, and Lena's question was filled with despair. Jerknev looked at them, Fluter and his disciples aside. The strain on the royal guards was slowly increasing, and they looked like they might break at any moment. This was because the hero Fluter's abnormal behavior in the description of the Death Knight's power had left them at a loss for what to do. What else can we do? And if you want to run, go AEAD. However, if you do that, you won't be one of us. Which means that to them, you'll be an intruder. I hope you don't end up like those workers who came here earlier. Lena's ground her teeth and her face twisted. Which means it's fine, right? Basilwood, look at Gramps. No, Fluter. He's the most familiar of all of us with magic, and he's like that now. All we can do is leave everything to our hosts. What about praying to the gods for luck, and then escaping? Do you really think we can escape? Basilwood glanced at the maids. They had clearly overheard them talking about fleeing, but calmly continued their preparations anyway. What if we took a hostage? I don't like to hear people talking about doing things that are clearly impossible. Lightning bolt. See what happens if you say that again. Forgive me. In truth, I feel that the maid is even more mysterious than the Death Knights. If someone told me they were stronger than them, I'd probably believe that too. I'm talking about such rude things in front of her, and she isn't batting an eye. How frightening. That maid was monstrously strong as well. As he thought about this, Jerknev shook his head. He desperately wanted to believe that not everyone on the tomb was ridiculously strong. As he thought about it, he tried his best to put the cold smiles of those two dark elves out of his mind. Looks like we are almost. Are we ready, then? In that case, everyone, I hope you will relax over here. There were many tables and chairs in place on the grass. The tables were covered in pure white tablecloths, and large parasols gave shade. The Death Knights who had been moving the furniture into place were standing by beside the log house in order not to get in the way. We have also prepared refreshments for you. Decanters beaded with moisture were arrayed on the tables, filled with an orange liquid. Beside them were high-stemmed wine glasses made of clear crystal. Each of them was intricately carved with elaborate designs. Even Jerknev, an emperor who enjoyed the best things in life, could not help but stare with eyes agape at the display before him. Please let us know if you need anything else. Then everyone. The log house's door opened once more, and more maids filed out from within. Their incredible beauty was enough to wipe away all the fear and unease they had experienced until now. Each of them was uniquely beautiful in their own way. One of them had hair that was pinned up into a chignon, another had long, straight hair, and a third had drill-shaped hair. Are they having a sale on beauties? Although Jerknev did not know which of the royal guards said that, he had to agree. After all, what would such bells be doing in a tomb? Does that tomb spawn beautiful women? Do they pop out of the ground one after the other? He heard the sound of a tongue clicking again, but paid it no heed. Then, please enjoy the drinks we have. Before that, could we meet Ainzul Gaon Sama first? I would like to expedite matters. And if it's alright, could I speak with him just before he meets with Fluter, contain yourself. No matter what, none of them could disgrace themselves or the Empire here. Have you missed something, Fluter? We're here as representatives of the Empire, not to satisfy your thirst for magical knowledge. By this time, a calm light had returned to Fluter's eyes. He had, for the most part, managed to subdue his rampant desire. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I was overcome by excitement. I beg the forgiveness of everyone else present as well. That's right, Gramps. Have a drink, calm yourself down. Then, shall we? Understood. Yuri slowly filled the glasses on the table before Jerknev with that same orange fluid. A fragrant citrus scent wafted through the air. Jerknev took a mouthful of the fruit juice, and the taste was such that he could not help but smile. It was a smile that seemed to say, "What have I been drinking all my life?" Looks of surprise appeared on the faces of the surrounding royal guards. If even Jerknev, who lived a life of decadence, could be surprised like this, how much more so these common men? As if to illustrate that point, there were many who had forgotten their manners and gulped the juice down as fast as possible. Shortly after, shocked exclamations rang out from the gathered men. "It's delicious. What kind of drink is this? It's a perfect blend of sweet and sour. It glides down your throat, and there's no cloying aftertaste." Jerknev took another drink as he heard the praise from all around him. Suddenly, he felt like he was filled with power. "So it tastes so good that my body is getting excited, huh? Does that mean Azarik has the best drinks? It seems I did insult those two dark elves back then. If they availed themselves of such wondrous drinks every day, then it's no wonder they weren't impressed by what we served." Jerknev smiled bitterly. To think, even a simple drink could defeat him so thoroughly. "Ah, I feel so calm now. This is the first time I've felt this relaxed since I came here. It's like I've come home." How long had they stayed out of the sun in the shade of the umbrellas and heard the wind blow through the grass? Eventually, Yuri said the words which Jerknev longed to hear. "I apologize for the delay. Ain Sama is ready to see you now, so please